All right, lovely.
All right, all good now.
All right, fabulous. Thank you all for inviting me here. And today I'm going to be talking about findability in the world of docs. As Swapnil said, he and I met when he was doing my information architecture masterclasses, which I'm doing some, recording them at the moment, but I will probably run them again next year. So feel free if anyone's interested to come back to me and say, I'd like to learn more. But today what I'm going to do is talk about findability, which is really the principles of information architecture and how they will work in your world of docs. So firstly, what is findability? So taken from Wikipedia, it's the ease in which information contained on a website, and let's put it as digital, can be found from both outside, so using search engines, or by users already within the website. And it encompasses aspects of information architecture, user interface design, accessibility, and SEO, amongst others. So for me, this is what I'm going to be talking to you today, is about the 4 different elements. Now, I'm not going to talk about SEO here. If we want to talk about SEO, we can talk about that different. I'm really focusing on the internal findability as opposed to findability for external. Ooh. I just clicked on something. So why do I think this is important to you? I think when we think about documentation, is we know the words that we use to talk about the documentation, but not necessarily the words the users themselves use. And if we think about the breadth of the users that we will have everyone from a novice who's perhaps using your software for the first time and wants to use your documentation to help them, to people who are using your documentation who are very, very expert, have great expertise within the systems, the software that you have already created. And so we have a breadth of people, and you may find those people who are experts talk the same language because you have taught them what this language is. But you may have those people who are novices who don't understand the domain and are actually using different language to you. So it's important for us to understand findability and to understand those users and the gamut of all of those users, and understanding the percentages you have of each of those and what words they use to document and to find this information. The second one is nearly 93% of all web traffic comes through search engines. And therefore we need to make sure our sites are optimized. Even though I'll touch on a little bit. And once they get to the site, if they're deep linked, and lots of people are deep linked, we want them to move about to see the rest of the content. And this is where information architecture and some of the navigation elements we're going to talk about today will help us work with how people will move around the information. And then if they get to the home page, so if they press on help, or they go into a documentation library, we want them to support them the way they search for information by providing internal search or navigation in words that reflect how they see the documents. So if we go back, we want them to be able to, we want to use their language to help them find our content. So there's 4 bits that I'm going to focus on today. It's users' mental models, navigation, classification, and search. So there's 2 different users' mental models that I'm going to go through. Now, we've all been in this place. We've all been in the place, and I've got 3 devices that I use, where I use my phone, I have my tablet, and I have my laptop. And we use them all for different reasons at different places. So why would you use your phone when there is a laptop in front of you and you can just do it as efficiently? Because this guy's probably getting a text from from a friend or family, and you don't always get texts via your laptop. It may be this is a personal phone and the laptop is a work laptop, and you actually don't want to mix the 2 together. It's one of the reasons I always use Spotify on my tablet, not on my my laptop when I was at work. It was something that was mine and I was doing it there. So the aim for us is to understand the reasons why we use different technology and the reasons why we use different terminology or we use different methods to find information, not just the behavior. So we could sit there and say, oh, look, this person's using it. People who are working from home will use a phone and a laptop. That's a behavior, that's what they do, but we want to understand why. So one of the first things I'm going to take you through is a model by from Marcia Bates. Marcia Bates is an emeritus professor from the University of California, I think, and University of UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. And she has done a lot of work in information seeking. So you could sit there and say documentation is when people are using it, it's all about seeking information. And I wanted to go through these modes as a way for you to start to think about your users when they're coming to you. So at the top, we have active and passive, and on the left, we have directed and undirected. So if something is active, someone is actively saying, I want to look for something, and directed meaning they have an idea in their mind and they are going and actively looking for it. So the directed, they are searching. Now, searching does not mean typing into a search box, or not only means typing into a search box. It could also mean going and using navigation, because if they've got something in their brain and they know exactly what it is, they're going to go through a navigation very, very quickly and very easily. Active, which is I'm looking for something, but I'm not really sure what it is. I've got a general idea. It's called browsing. And you can browse in a search box as much as you can browse via navigation. Browsing means that what you're doing is providing the people with the potential of being educated to narrow down what they're seeing, so that you are teaching them about the document space as they are going through with a more general search term. Searching is active and sitting there and saying, I'm looking for something specific. Help me get there. We have passive. Now, passive is, I am not going out there and looking for something. Passive is saying, I let it come to me. So directed and passive is when someone says, I am going to sign up for a newsletter. And that newsletter is about this particular topic. So you may have people who will say, I'm very interested in when you do a release. And this is directed and passive. They have said, I'm interested in the releases, and they will just expect you to send it to them. So every time there's a new release of the documentation, it will get sent to them. Or there's a new release of the software, information gets sent to them. Directed and passive. We then have undirected and passive, which is being aware. And that's placing yourself somewhere where the information will come to you. Now, this could be, this information will come to you because you just go to the website and suddenly an piece of information comes in, or you're using the software itself. And as you're using the software, there will be a help icon, or instructional text will turn up that will support them and take them off to your documentation. So when you look at this from your modes of information seeking, it's a very useful construct for you to understand where people are and what they're doing. And it therefore makes a difference to what information architecture you put around your documentation to support, are they searching or browsing, monitoring or being aware. The next one I want to take through with you is berry picking. So berry picking is also something else from Marcia Bates. Now, Marcia Bates did the first one the first one was around about 2004, 2003, 2004. This berry picking model is from much older. You can see these poor old information scientists, they're just not very good at their their diagrams. This is actually from the late 80s. Now, berry picking, is this piece, this research came out in the late 80s, and it was talking about online searching. Now, I don't know if any of you are old enough, and my area of expertise is librarianship. So this online databases, these online, have been around probably for, maybe 50 years, maybe a little longer, maybe even 60 years. And these are ones where people would dial in and search. They would cost a phenomenal amount of money to go in and search all of these databases of academic research, published research, to be able to find academic papers. And the way that they're thinking about it at that point in time was that everything was top down. You would put a search and you would come down and you'd find a article or a journal article, and then go up and then put another search and get more journal articles. But what she saw was people actually go through the process and say, how can I link all of these documents together and follow those paths? So use Find a Berry and follow the path. And because this was academic research, the elements she was talking about were things like, you found a really good paper and you would look at the author and you would look at where their lab was or what university they were in. And usually you would have someone who ran a lab or who supervised a number of different people, and they would have something in common. So therefore, you could quite easily go and find that lab or the person who supervised it and see what other papers were connected to that to find other things of interest. So the aim was to say, we don't always just go back up and go back down to find an article or to find information. We actually use the properties to follow the path to find other things of interest. And if we apply this to documentation, what we're saying is you could be in a piece of documentation and you will find maybe there are other related pieces based on maybe the topic or the part of the document, part of the software, or a topic about it, where you would actually go and find that and go and follow that path to find more of that information. So what I want you to think about is, when we think about information architecture, we talk a lot about top down and search and browse and nav, but actually think about how you would move through an information space by thinking about how people connect all of the different pieces of content together. So let me talk a little bit about navigation. So there's two bits to navigation. There's a navigation model and there's navigation labeling. And I sort of, Swapnil knows this. For me, I can talk for Australia. So I can probably go on, and I had so many more slides I could have gone through with you. But today I'm just going to show you the model. And then every time you go in and you do some e-commerce, go and have a look and say, is that supplementary navigation, that global navigation? So when you look at a navigation model, this is all of the different types. You don't have to have every single one, but this is what they do. And therefore you get to choose which ones are the appropriate one for you and your audience. So the main one's your global navigation. So it's up the top here. And it says what's in the site. We then have local navigation. So what's in the section. And then the other major one is contextual navigation. So what's related. So if we go back to the berry picking, the contextual navigation is the way for us to show the what's related and allows people to be able to move through the information space rather than having to go up and then go down again. Now, the way that I've shown this is just a good schematic. Your navigation could be just all on the side, it could be at the top, you could have a mega nav, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is you choose the right one for each of your sites and the documentation you're creating. We then have two others. We have the footer, which is usually what the organization is about, and then the supplementary navigation. Supplementary navigation is incredibly useful, and I want you to think about this when it comes to documentation that you're creating. I think about supplementary navigation as two ways. You could have an index of topics. You could have an index of tasks. You could use brand names. If these are things that are being used within your documentation, you've got multiple different ways of thinking about it. You could have an audience. So supplementary, if you decide that your global navigation, and we're going to talk about labels and organization schemes after this, your global navigation this is the primary way we provide access via the navigation. You can sit there and say, are there alternative ways that people think about accessing this content, and provide them as a supplementary way to find it? Could be a guide as well. And if you're talking about things like e-commerce, you will have account. You may have this in some of your documentation as well, that you have an account. I've been using Xero at the moment, and I had a problem when it came to people couldn't see any of my invoices. And it worked out that it was one of the payment gateways I'd connected to. It had stopped people being able to actually even see the invoices. And I had to go through their help system. And when the help system didn't work, I had to go and then lodge an actual case. I had to be logged in for that, so they knew who I was. So even though with some documentation, you may have an account. And then there's the utility navigation, where search is usually placed, but this is what can I do? So for a lot of people, that will be things like social will be in there. Your utility navigation will also, as I said, include search. And then we've got navigation labels. So I've grabbed 3 different versions here of labels from hardware stores around the world. We have Bunnings on our left, so the category is the long one. We have B&Q, which is in the UK, and we have Home Depot, which is in the US. Now, if you have a look at these labels, basically they sell the same thing in all of them. But the differences in the labels are based on where they are. So if you go in and have a look, in Bunnings, we have bathroom and plumbing. In B&Q, it is kitchen and bathroom. And in Home Depot, we've got bath and faucets. And they've also then got plumbing there separately. So all of them have different labels, and we choose those different labels based on the way that we think about the content and the way that we think about the users think about our content. One of the other bits is we can't create labels that for content that doesn't exist or that we don't have it. So you may find that there will be subtle differences between what content is provided, the products that are being provided in each of these based on where they are. And therefore, we won't have that particular label. So I'm not sure that we have log cabins turning up in the categories in Bunnings, but they do exist, which is just amazing, do exist in the UK. So to follow on from that, we need to start to think about the words we use to describe a category. And this is the main point, one of my main points when it comes to choosing words. In the literary world, in academia, we go with something called a literary warrant, which is the term that are used by the academics to describe it. And if any of you remember going back into uni, where you'd go and search the journals, and nothing was plain English. It was all very academic terms being used for any of the searches, and you had to learn their language. And any words that were there that maybe you put in a word, it would then direct you to that particular term, that very academic formal term. So with us, user warrant, the user terms are most important, because we want, in software and in digital, we want to make sure that the end user finds what they want. It's not all about the academic work itself. We want to connect them. So we're talking about blending what the organization calls it with what the users call it to make it findable. And in digital and in documentation, I feel that user warrant is more important than literary warrant, that we should be using plain English as much as possible. to provide access into the documentation that we are creating, rather than we use the words that the organization uses and expect that the users understand it. But if I go back to my point at the beginning, which is you're going to have a spectrum of users who are using your content. And you may have a large number who you've already taught the language. And so you may want to blend the two together. I saw this slightly different, or totally different context, but in the same way. I was working with banks in the UK. And the bank that I was working with, Santander, turned about and said, we want to do everything by event. Our retail banking, we want to talk about owning your own home or being pregnant or starting a family as the labels we want to use on the website. And I totally knew that that was the wrong way to go. So I turned to them and said, let's test this. I'm going to do some card sorting. We're going to do some tree jack. We will test this to make sure which one's right. And there's not a problem. We can do that. What I turned up and said to them is, you have already taught the British public about what terms we use in banking. They know what a credit card is. They know what a mortgage is. They know what a pension, so pension, the equivalent of our 401, our superannuation, or in the US 401k. They know what these are. They know what an ISA is. You don't need to say at this point in time, these are the types of things that you want. They're quite willing and able to understand what each of those products are and can go in and navigate by it. So the British banking industry has taught people their language. You don't have to make it in this event more I'm going to say user-centered, more colloquial terms to actually find the information. And I think that's the blend I want you to think about. So, rules for labels. Don't go with a theme. It's hard to maintain when you expand, and you will always expand. Design for scannability. So I want you to look at the scan all of this stuff, so that if everything starts with the same word, then it's incredibly hard for people to scan. And as you know, people do when they're reading. They're going to be hit by something. If everything is do or everything is the, you're going to have some problems. Use your consistency of terms. So if you are using the same term, one term, if you define it and use it in a particular context, continue to use that. And if they're different, then use different words for them. For navigation, don't worry about everything being in the same level of granularity. So I did some work at JB Hi-Fi, and when we were looking at navigation, we sat there in computers and we said, people want to find computer cords, and they are much smaller and less expensive than HP laptops, but they want to find both. So let's make sure both of those are in our navigation. And the last one is use plurals when you can. Now I'm going to go quickly through organizational schemes. Now we've got all of our labels. We can see what they look like and you can see the terms, but now you get to choose what your organizational scheme is that you are going to use. And there's two major ones, two ways that we can group these. There's exact, where information is organized by factual property of the content. So maybe an A to Z list of projects, so organized by project name, or a list of new features in the software ordered by date. So this could be in your release notes. You've got ambiguous, and this is a subjective analysis of the content and you saying this is what we think it is. So audience is definitely subjective. I'm doing a little bit of work with a water company in Gippsland at the moment, and we are sitting there and talking about plumbers and developers and builders. And I am sure there are some plumbers who work for builders and work for developers, and they may be doing similar things in each place, but they may go under the developer one because they think that's what they are. So it's very hard for us to use audience particularly well. And so does an API, spec for an API belong in an audience for DevOps or one for software developers? It could be it belongs in both. So you may sit there and say audience is not the right way for us to go. The majority of global navigation on websites is ambiguous. It's usually task or topic, and it's made up to blend the mental models of the users with the organization. I find that we use exact organizational schemes for supplementary navigation most of the time. So some examples. Exact based on a fact. And it's usually an intrinsic property of the item or intrinsic property of the content. So it could be time or format, size, brand, author. So you could write in documentation, time works very well when it comes to release notes. You could be organizing stuff by format. If you had lots and lots of PDFs, gosh, I hope you don't, but if you did, sometimes we do, you could be organizing them by format or size, brand and author. You could be there are particular authors who you want to provide access to because they are known as experts within the software that you are developing documentation for. We then have the ambiguous, and they are based on a classification that was made up. Someone said this is what they are. Each item is put into a group based on the knowledge of the person of the domain and of the content itself. So our examples are topic and subject, product category, or one of the earliest ones was taxonomy of life. Most of you will probably be looking at creating an ambiguous to help support findability. And as I keep saying, if we go back to where the users think about it and then connect the two together, we will then create an ambiguous that is user-centered. I want you to start to look at it and go, are there any exact organization schemes that could be very useful to help people find this information if they can't connect to your ambiguous? Which brings us to controlled vocabularies. Now, this is the one that was hardest for me because it's hard to give you a big old dump of information about CVs quickly. So what I want to talk to, and this is the most when I talk about information architecture and findability, controlled vocabularies are the ones that are the hardest because they're the most technical. This is the stuff which I loved, which is when I was doing cataloging and indexing and abstracting at university. This is the stuff I sat there and went, well, this is really cool, this is fun. And we were a very small class, it was about 10 or 12 of us, and there was 3 of us who loved it. Everyone else just sat there going, we have to do this class, we're just going to do it. So controlled vocabularies are about describing content to allow content to connect to each other, users to connect to content, or users to connect to users. So it is a defined set of words used to describe content or users, and therefore allowing these things to be related together. We want to be able to have this defined list. Now, you could call this, in database terms, these guys would just basically call it a defined list or a pick list. Some of our controlled vocabularies can be much larger. If any of you have worked with thesauri, you will know that these are large, complex controlled vocabularies. But the aim is that we are cataloging and creating, adding tags or adding terms to each piece of content that allows us to connect to content in our contextual navigation, users to content. So if they were signing up for release notes and they said, we're this for this piece of software or this particular feature, we will always know that, we will connect those together, or users to users. So an example of content to content is, this is the Guardian website, and I was reading an article about Nomadland before Nomadland actually won the Academy Award for the Best Picture. And the related stories at the bottom of the article were about Frances McDormand. And Frances McDormand is a star of that particular movie. And as you can see, they have grabbed all of this, is the controlled vocabulary they grabbed was probably actor, or just even maybe even proper name. And they said, what we will do is everything that's related can be on Frances McDormand. We will then just show all of them. And we will grab probably the last 8 articles that we have written about her, and they go in there. So ideally, this is automatically generated with a set of business rules. So, and because you have already classified everything in this way, it will then turn up. And if you were doing this with someone creating this every single time, it would be very onerous. But if you create it so it is generated, it means that it will be updated with anything new that comes through. So connecting content to content. We then have a person to content, and this is actually personalization. This is not customization. So customization says, I'm interested in these. So this could be you signing up for a newsletter, and this is your monitoring. I am interested in this, and therefore will you show this to me? This is person to content, which is personalization. And personalization says, I know stuff about you, so I'm going to recommend something to you. I've seen that you have viewed this particular, it was a Brené Brown book. I've seen that you were viewing this particular one. So other people who have viewed this, here's the other content that would be useful to you. This is from Sephora, recommended to you. I have previously bought some Charlotte Tilbury, and I've definitely bought some stuff from Fenty previously. And so therefore they're sitting there going, based on your buying patterns, this is what we're going to recommend to you. Because we know you've bought these particular brands, again, we will show this information to you. So we're connecting the person to the content. I haven't authorized it, which would be customization. It is personalization, because it is saying, we know information about you, we're going to show it to you. And that's why some personalization gets a bit iffy. My example on Amazon is I have a 5-year-old niece, actually 6-year-old niece, just turned 6 in lockdown again. And sometimes I have bought stuff for her on Amazon, which I buy it 2 times a year. And sometimes I get spammed, continue to be spammed with kids stuff, when actually I'm more interested in being spammed with these sorts of books. So there is an aspect of personalization of unless you get it right and you start looking at frequency, you may actually find yourself providing stuff that actually isn't as valuable to the end user. But it's all based on controlled vocabularies and connecting data and people, the data of the content to the data held about the person. And then users to users. So this is sitting there and saying, here are all some recommendations for you of people who you may be connected to. And actually, the majority of these were from my previous gym. So we were connected, and you can say they've got all of these mutual friends. And so they're saying, let me look at the properties of who you are and then connect more people together because you have things in common. You've got these friends in common. And our controlled vocabularies allow us to do this data mining. And then the last one I'm going to go through is search. Now, I'm going to use these two different models here that I want to go through with you. Both of them are by Peter Norville. I actually like the second one that I'm going to go through with you more than I like the first one. So I'm going to preface this with we can design search. Search is not purely a technical aspect. We can design it based on our documentation, our content, and understanding who our users are. We can design what it looks like and the results that turn up for our end users, because we want to make sure that it meets their needs. So the way that this first diagram talks about it is this sort of anatomy, is an ecosystem. So we have users and we have creators on either end, and you are probably in the creator space. What we think about when it comes to the users is their goals, the psychology, their behavior. So thinking, understanding their information seeking, what sort of words do they type in? What are they looking for? As creators, we are sitting there and we're creating the content. And so we need to understand, are we tagging this content? Is it well structured? Do we have the right tools in place? Do we have a process for review? And it all connects in this query engine. So the query engine, where we put in a query and we get the results, is influenced by the actual engine, the algorithms and the technology, which is of course fed in with the content. And I think this takes it into more detail, search as a system. So we have, and we can design the search interface. So we can say, is this just a box? Is this a box which we say which domain that we look at? And if you think about the Amazon one, you have Amazon, and then you can choose, actually, here I am. It's on the left-hand side, I'm seeing it in my brain, where you can just choose to search for books, just search for Kindle, for example, and put in a name of something. So we can build a query using the interface to actually make it more specific. We can do things like add a spell checker on it to make sure that the right words are being spelled correctly. We can put it as an auto suggest. Here are the words that we think actually would make sense, or an auto correct. As we're typing it in, it corrects the term. So we can design what that interface is to make sure that the queries going in are as correct as possible. Then we have the actual search engine. The query goes in, which goes and connects into the content. If we have good structured content, whether it is structured via XML or we have it as an API, we can then sit there and say, let's understand where this search query connects into the content. If we put controlled vocabularies, we can say, it's part of this controlled vocabulary, this tag. We can then go and gather all of these documents together and rank and cluster them so that we boost up the content that is of more value to the context of what the user is looking for. And we do that with our interface design. So one of my examples, and I haven't got it here, so I'll just talk through it, is I worked for an organization called Time Out in London. And Time Out does events. They put events and venues in. And we had loads of people who would search for all sorts of stuff. So we would have brunch, and we would have jazz, and we would have all the films. So films went through very, very quickly. So unfortunately, I am so looking forward to being out of Melbourne and being able to go and see a movie again. So we would have all of those different ones. And we would then be able to look at the terms that were coming through and go, okay, we can boost something up. But we also had a set of business rules. So Time Out made its money by getting people to book through the website for a restaurant or buy tickets for a show or for a film. And so therefore we had particular things that we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to boost up anything that had a booking button on it. We also, when we think about Time Out created a lot of reviews. So you wanted to go to Time Out and find the best reviewed burger joint. So one of the things that I would do is if someone was searching for burgers, I'd sit there and go, okay, burgers in central London. Great. We have 30 different restaurants available to us. What I want to do is to make sure I rank them in a way that makes sense. Well, firstly, if they have burger in the title and they're classified as a burger joint and the cuisine is burgers, they're a burger. So they get a bigger number and get pushed up to the top. And say I had 5 of those. We'd sit there and go, okay, these 5 all have the same weighting. Then I'd sit there and go, from a business perspective, anything that has a booking button on it, so they could go and book and to go to that restaurant, I would want to give that a little boost up. But also I'd like to give anyone that has a really good review boost up as well and is recommended. And so I would sit there and say, look at my 5 and go, okay, well, I've got 2 there. I've got 3 of them have a booking button and 2 of them have a recommendation as well. Both of them are 5-star. I put the top 2, I put those that have the booking button and the recommendation at the top, and then I'd probably order them by alphabetical order. So they made some sort of sense. And then I'd have the one which had the booking button, and then I'd put the other 2 underneath it. So the aim for me is to sit there and say, what does the user want? How do I make sure the most relevant content comes up the top? And if there's any business rules around it, how do I make sure that those business rules push it up, but never, ever reduce the quality of the results turning up to the user? We're always saying this has to be relevant content. So I'd like you, when you're thinking about your documentation, of understanding this always comes back to what does the user want, what is their context, and therefore what results am I providing to them so they find the right stuff. And that's what Search as a System is about. So I'm going to finish up here. There's two things I want to say. I have just published my first book, which is called Career Architecture. And if you're interested in any of this when it comes to taxonomies, I am contributing a chapter on information architecture for e-commerce as part of a taxonomies book, which is going to be out in early 2022. So thank you. And lastly, if anyone wants to have a bit of a chat to me about this, and I will put this up and you'll be getting these slides as well. I have a Calendly link, so you can always book in and have a bit of a chat to me about any of your needs when it comes to documents or anything else. You just want to have a chat, you can. So thank you.
Thanks, Max. That was really good. Look, I know we've sort of got maybe about 5 or 6 minutes for questions. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question directly to Max.
I had a slide on that had use plurals, and there were a few other things on that slide. I wonder if you could give some explanation for the suggestions that you made on that slide.
So let's talk about plurals in particular, and then I'll go through the rest of them. So plurals, most people actually search in plurals. So that's why we use plurals. Plurals also mean that a lot of the stemming software that we will do actually will support, will take it back down into a singular as well. So that's when we say use plurals. So that's the reason between that one. And let me go back to that slide and actually just make sure there are other bits on that one. Rules for labels. Yes, themes. When I first started doing a lot of information architecture, and in particular with content, I was a bit of a themer. So I'd be sitting there going, and the worst version of themes, if those of you in Melbourne, those of you in Australia remember, was Commonwealth Bank used CAN, and they used it for their navigation. So everything was CAN. It didn't really help if they wanted to expand out to anything else, because it was a theme that was very limited to what the content they had right now. So I'm a bit of a call a spade a spade. So if it is something that's what the users call it, and this is what it makes sense when it comes to your documentation, use that rather than try and get it to become into a theme. Let me look at the next one. Scannability. Scannability is all about making sure that people can look at something very, very quickly and work out what the right item is. So that's all about making sure that you are making differences between what each of the labels are, not starting everything with the same word, describing it in plain terms so it's not hard for them to read it. So really work for scannability. And then consistency. I spent a lot of time when I first go in and work with organizations about, we have multiple ways we could describe something, and actually creating a style guide for words that we use. And I'll answer Donald's for words that we use. So what I sit there and I go, when I look at consistency, is to agree in the organization on what we're using each term for, and then use it specifically in the same way across the whole of the site. And I'm sure you're doing exactly the same when it comes to your documentation. But if you sit there and go, okay, I want to have this style guide available to me for my navigation as much as I use this within the documentation that I'm creating. And then granularity. I think I bring the granularity one up because when I work in libraries, and as I said, I've come from a library background, there was the purity of the classification, the purity of the navigation, which meant that everything had to be at the same level, that you would go from the biggest down to the smallest. And when you think about navigation, Your aim is the window into the document store. It is the window into the e-commerce. It's the window into, I'm going to just say something like the coronavirus website. It is the window into this. You want to be able to get to the quickest things as quickly as possible. So it doesn't matter if they're not all the same level. We can have big ones and we can have small ones. Cool. All right, we've got 2 questions there. So for Donal, how can we learn the terms? Thanks, Catherine. How can we learn the terms users search with, given that they may not use the same words to describe a feature as we would? So firstly, search logs. Turn on your search logs if you have any. Many search engines, it's not default to turn it on, so go and gather those search terms. Secondly, there are ways that you can gather the types of terms that are being put on search via Google, which you can go and collect some of those. So try and see if you can find any sort of Google search terms that are coming through. And the third one, and this happens a lot when there's content that you've never created before, if it's new content, is I would do one-on-one user research and do something called free listing, where we would get people to write down as many of the words as possible. You may also, and I find this in particular in consumer, if people are writing reviews about anything, they would use particular language and you may have that language coming through. And Chris has said, how do you analyze if your findability is working? Are there any techniques? Yes, what I would do first is I would benchmark. So I would benchmark how people can find content. So if you can do one-on-one research, so you actually get people to take them through the process and you get them to go through and you can see, do they find it? Go and say any emails that are coming through from a customer service point of view. Can't find this content. Where do I find this content? Use that as a way to say, does it find the right information? Donal, I'm Irish. I've got an Irish passport and as well as Australian. So therefore, what you're trying to do is understand where you are right now and where you want to moving forward. Okay. And I think we're 1 o'clock.
Yeah, excellent. You've timed it rightly, Max. So yeah, thank you for this. I will upload the video. I'll get this recording up on the YouTube channel. And Max, do you want to share the slides with me? I can maybe put it in the meetup page and send an email out to everyone who's attended today as well.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. Thank you everyone for attending. Yeah, thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.